Hey mamas, I'm Brooke Miller, registered dietitian, certified lactation counselor, and a mama who has helped hundreds of moms feel like themselves again after baby, boost their energy, mood, metabolism, and even milk supply. Inside of the Postpartum Shift podcast, you'll learn how to take care of your health so that you can show up best for the ones you care about most. Each week, we'll tackle topics like nutrition, exercise, breastfeeding, mental health, and so much more. Plus, you'll get access to guest experts who will share ways to make your pregnancy and postpartum experience easier. Whether you're approaching the postpartum period or you're right in the thick of it, you're in the right place. Let's dive into today's topic. Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk all about intimacy and sex and all of the things after baby and how that can change with your relationship. So if that's something you want to hear about, then this episode is for you. And I have a special guest, Kathryn Lopez, and she is going to be sharing some of her top tips that have helped moms and couples through this season of life and navigating it. So Kathryn, do you mind just sharing a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, who you help?
Yes, thanks so much, Brooke. It's great to be here. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and life coach. So I specialize in the perinatal mental health and sex and intimacy therapy. I like to work with individuals and couples that are navigating the emotional and relational shifts of parenthood, all the way from conception through pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and beyond. So, yeah,
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. And can you share where you live too? Because I think that's a fun fact.
Yeah, I live part-time in Ecuador in the Andean mountain range here in Ecuador, and then part-time in Northern California, where I was born and raised.
Love that. And how do you see sex and intimacy change after couples have babies, whether it's their first baby, second, third? And I would even love to hear if you see differences, like between having your first baby versus other kids, different challenges that maybe come up.
Yes, that's such a good question. So I often like to break this up into four categories. There's many more, but these are kind of the top four that I see. So areas such as physical, emotional, relational, and physiological. I kind of helps to think about it. So physically, it really depends on how labor goes, right? Is there
Hmm.
been a traumatic birth? Have you had a C-section or a vaginal labor? Are there tears or any infections? These types of things can really impact sex after baby,
Hmm.
right? So looking at that physical lens is something I like to bring attention to. And then going into more of the emotional realm, right? One thing I bring into session a lot with my clients is this identity shift that happens to mothers every single time they have a baby called matrescence. So this can often lead to feelings of disconnection with oneself before birth and who am I now?
Hmm.
And it can make it harder to access feelings of desire and feeling sensual and in your sexual body, these components. So that's a really important piece emotionally. Another
Hmm.
one, as many moms can understand, is the emotional overload or the mental load, right? That happens with having little ones.
Hmm.
And so all these demands and being exhausted and making decisions.
Hmm.
So these can definitely impact, our feelings of desire for sex or wanting to be close with our partner. And then also there's a really common theme is of around body image and self-esteem, right?
Hmm.
After going through pregnancy, there's so many body changes that happen and they can be different per baby, right?
Hmm.
Different pregnancies. So really being mindful that that can impact, how we're feeling in our bodies sexually, how we're feeling with our partners around intimacy, and then relationally. So a
Hmm.
big one with this is, does mama feel supported, right?
Right.
Are there any feelings of resentment? Are there misaligned expectations around parenting responsibilities?
Hmm.
So that is that's a big one that I work with couples on, right? Often there's a lot of assumptions, and we really have to be careful about assumptions of maybe what the other person's going to be doing or what we're going to be doing and how things are going to be going.
Hmm.
Another one that fits under this is that kind of hot topic of touched out, right?
Hmm.
After after
Yep.
mama's, with baby and feeling really touched out, sometimes the last thing she wants to be feeling is more touch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, just that it's a very common piece. And then physiologically, I think it's really important to shine light too on what's going on hormonally for a
Mm-hmm.
new mama, right? With estrogen, progesterone plummeting after birth, right? That can really impact lubrication and desire and um, mood and progesterone. It's incredible, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it can be really hard to kind of get into that zone, right, with our
Mm-hmm.
partner because we have a lot of hormonal dynamics. And if you think about it, it actually uh, there's a biological function to that, right? If you have a new baby, the last thing your body is probably going to want to do is to get pregnant again,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it doesn't mean anything's wrong. It actually serves quite a purpose there.
Mm-hmm.
And then another thing in terms of the physiological piece is I find it really important to think about the neurobiology that's happening for new moms, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pruning that's happening in the prefrontal cortex, which impacts how you're thinking and how you're feeling mentally, and often can add to that feeling of, oh man, I really don't feel like myself and I can't think straight. And it's a whole new me mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that can, really impact like hypervigilance, right? There's more attention for a new mom around bonding, attachment, security of baby. That is where her focus is, especially early postpartum,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't leave a ton of space just for spontaneous desire and arousal and time and connection with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
So these are all factors that play a part
Yeah.
in our sex and desire, right? Partner.
Yeah, and a lot of like breastfeeding moms don't really realize just like the
Mhm.
hormonal shifts and like what that does physically too, like if you're breastfeeding
Yeah.
versus not breastfeeding. And so I'm glad you kind of mentioned that as well, because yeah, that can definitely play a role. And I'd love to hear just like any tips or advice that you have about body image specifically. So, like, if a mom is feeling really uncomfortable in her body, or she is upset that she maybe hasn't lost all the baby weight yet and she feels self conscious, like, do you have any advice for kind of navigating that, especially in a lot of cases where her partner doesn't care? Like, he's like, I'm fine. I just want to have sex. I don't really care what you necessarily look like or that your body has changed. But a lot of moms still feel really self conscious around that. So, can you kind of touch on any advice that's been helpful for
Mhm.
clients in that regard?
Yes, it's so important. And it's a very common piece that comes
Mm-hmm.
up because our body changes so quickly with pregnancy, right?
Yeah.
And then being postpartum. I mean, one thing that I find is very helpful for my clients is actually spend some time, easier said than done, but on your own,
Mm-hmm.
getting to know and becoming familiar with your new body in this moment, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going to be changing and evolving, right, throughout postpartum. But yeah, where are your aches and pains? Where are areas that do feel good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And might bring arousal to the surface, right? How do you feel aroused now in postpartum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And most often it's different than before baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to become familiar with this new version of ourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? As we go through that identity shift of matrescence, it is internal, emotional, physical piece too that we have to become familiar with before. I think it's helpful to do that before expecting, to feel comfortable with our partner even.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's spending time with yourself or looking at yourself in the mirror or just, doing some body scans,
Mm-hmm.
getting used to your new self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. And do you feel like because a lot of times after we have babies, the communication, a lot of us run into communication issues with our partner of
Mhm.
like, you're responsible for this, and now we're doing this. And there's just a lot of things that shift from that regard. Do you find that when couples have difficulty just communicating, that starts to kind of play a role in their intimacy and sex life and being able to really connect?
Yes, I'd say it's one of the main pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Before having children, sometimes people and couples can, kind of rely on just spontaneously, getting into it and having a lot of space and time available to have sex and be intimate and flirt and all these pieces. But after, everyone's different, but
Mm-hmm.
after having a baby, I find you have to be proactive. You
Yeah.
have to cut time aside to first connect. And
Mm-hmm.
often that's that emotional connection piece. So I often suggest for clients to have a check-in, a regular check-in, and to talk about sex
Mm-hmm.
often during this check-in, right? That it's not just about parenting and the kids and these pieces, but talk about your needs or your wants and desires or your fears or your boundaries and your limitations within sex and intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And really just kind of keep a living conversation about this going on and get really good at talking about sex with
Mm-hmm.
your partner, because it requires proactivity and intentionality to keep it going and to
Mm-hmm.
keep it thriving after having a baby. And talk about expectations too. And one of those that I find to be really helpful for my clients is expect to be interrupted all the
Mm.
time
Yeah.
and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
That's just kind of how it is. And it's a phase right now. It won't be like this forever. I know it can
Mm-hmm.
feel like that, right? Early postpartum, or even in the first 2, 3 years postpartum.
Yeah.
But it is just a phase and it will be different in time. But to challenge yourself to get as good as possible at sex and intimacy with your partner and yourself during this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. Something I know that has really helped us just connect more has been being very proactive about date nights and having just alone time to talk and connect
Yeah.
without kids running around. I think that that has been something that we've prioritized this third postpartum experience that we didn't necessarily do the first time around. We did it a little
Hmm.
bit more, at the end of our second postpartum experience, but we really realized, especially like my love language is quality time and acts of service. So if I don't get quality time or acts of service and I don't feel connected, do you
Yeah.
find that a lot of moms, when they have a baby, do you find that a lot of moms kind of fall into that too with like the acts of service, like, or maybe their love language type of thing starts to shift once they have a baby versus before? Or do you find that a lot of moms, like if they always liked getting gifts to connect, that's still kind of a thing? I've just talked to so many moms where it feels like the acts of service, like getting support around the
Mhm.
house or with the baby, that is something really big where a mom feels like she can't connect until she gets that.
Yes, I actually heard this term chore play,
Oh,
instead of
yes.
foreplay, right? That, acts of service and helping with household duties and division of labor and all of this, that is one of the biggest turn-ons,
Mm-hmm.
right? That yeah. So I definitely hear that come forward for a lot of new moms.
Yeah.
And, maybe if their love language is around physical touch, that can also ebb and flow, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
always, but something that, maybe if that was a clearly understood thing that their partner, was clear about giving them lots of, quality touch and sensual touch, that might be not at all something that they're wanting now. So that it
Right.
goes back into just continuing to talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Conversing about it, not in those heated moments where, you're in the middle of doing all this stuff and you're changing diapers and doing dishes, but having those moments set aside that are dedicated to really being on the same pages about these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talking about them in reflective ways and with compassion for the
Mm-hmm.
other.
If you've been wanting to reach your healthiest weight and feel like yourself again postpartum without having to sacrifice your favorite foods or your milk supply, I've got a free workshop just for you. Inside of this free workshop, you'll discover how to boost energy, mood, metabolism, and even protect your milk supply. You'll learn common mistakes that moms make that actually cause exhaustion, mood swings, low milk supply, and weight loss resistance to become worse, things that moms don't even realize. And you'll learn the proven 3-step method to heal your hormones and metabolism after baby so you can go from surviving to thriving postpartum. Plus, as a free gift, you'll get my postpartum snack guide when you come hang out with us. All you have to do is click the link in the show notes to save your seat today. Spots are limited. See you there.
Yeah. Is there anything that couples can do, maybe if they're pregnant right now and about to go into another postpartum experience, to kind of help prepare them for some of the challenges and kind of get ahead of maybe some of the challenges that may happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. I love, being proactive and having kind of preventative measures in place. So I like the idea a lot of before having a baby, make an agreement, even put it on the calendar. Maybe it's 6 weeks postpartum, 3 months postpartum, whatever it is, to talk about sex after at that point, right? Because after you have a baby, you're just in this whole other world, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you can forget about a lot of these things. But around sex and intimacy, if we prolong talking about it, it can go on for a long, long time. And people can, you know, relationships can there can be a lot of distance that's created, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can put something on the calendar, I mean, I'm a very calendary person,
Yeah.
so this might work for some and not for others, but to talk ahead of time and to say, hey, on this date, 3 months post due date, let's have a conversation about sex and see
Mm-hmm.
just where we're at because we have no idea what that's going to look like and feel like and be like, but let's not drop the ball on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that, like, what are some struggles that you see, especially in like a heterosexual relationship, like
Hmm.
men feel because they didn't necessarily go through like the physical and they're not necessarily waking up all the time. They may not be as
Hmm.
tired. Like, they just have a lot, they just have a much different experience than a female going through birth and labor and breastfeeding and all of the things. Do you
Hmm.
find that men are sometimes like frustrated or they don't really understand necessarily what their partner is going through? And how can we communicate in a way so that they understand what we're going through and they can still support us?
Yes, I think that's really important to look at. With my couples, I often do a lot of psychoeducation around matrescence. And
Mm-hmm.
if a father, a husband can do some of his own education around
Mm-hmm.
that identity shift and the what is involved in
Right.
that, I think is very helpful to create a better idea and understanding of, what your wife is going to be going through.
Yeah.
It's a significant in physical, hormonal, emotional, spiritual, neurological ways as adolescents, but it happens in such a short period of time.
Right.
So here, your partner, in a way, it's a birth of a mother as well as the birth of a baby. So a whole new person is becoming your partner,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so just to have a little heads up about what that might entail, not only is helpful, I think, for the husband, but also for them to support and be there for their wife through this
Mm-hmm.
process and maybe bring attention to, sweetheart, like this is a huge identity shift and process that you are actively going through,
Mm-hmm.
right? And just to help hold space for them because when mom's going through it, when you're going through a really hard time, you often can't really see what's right in front of you.
Yeah.
But if your partner can be there to advocate for you and to really understand where you're coming from
Mm-hmm.
and just hold space for you in that way, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah.
Um, Another piece is, for example, if you set aside time for that weekly, bi-monthly check-in, I think that can be a time where, people can maybe talk about some expectations they had that aren't accurate or
Mm-hmm.
assumptions they had about what this would be like or
Right.
how they would share responsibilities and how it's feeling and what's working and what's not to
Mm-hmm.
keep on leaning into, parenting together and prioritizing the relationship. All these, plates we have to hold in the air and
Mm-hmm.
just staying talking about it and that you don't have to come up with necessarily an answer or the right way to go about it, but just keep the conversation going
Mm-hmm.
because it will evolve and it will become more clear in time.
Yeah. And what do you recommend in terms of like when should a couple see a therapist regarding this? Do you feel like every couple should be in therapy to some extent, or I know we've done therapy. I've done therapy on my own as well. And I can see like there's so many benefits to doing it in a proactive way.
Mhm.
But are there some instances where you're like, yeah, this is a really, really important time. Like you really need to be going to a therapist, whether it's individual or couples counseling when it
Mhm.
comes to this type of issue.
Yes. So I think proactive measures are very helpful. And I always love working with people during their pregnancy or even preconception when they're kind of, family planning and thinking about the idea of having a family and children. Um, that is always so helpful to kind of have a leg up. But if it's not in that more preventative light, I think it's really important if you start feeling like we keep on going around in the circles again and again and
Mm-hmm.
again, and we can't seem to, figure out how to work something out, or the
Mm-hmm.
same issue keeps on coming up again and again and again. And for some reason we can't meet eye to eye, or we can't kind of move forward in figuring out whatever the challenge is another piece where sometimes having a third party, a a professional, to just kind of help shine light on certain areas, because we all have blinders around
Yeah.
certain pieces, right? And so a little boost, a little support in that, therapy can be just a few sessions, or it can be a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's however you want it to look and whatever is best for that individual or couple,
Mm-hmm.
right? Another thing is if you feel just kind of an overwhelm, dread and lack of fulfillment and happiness and joy, like it's hard and it's raw this time.
Mm-hmm.
But if there are no kind of glimpses of light and beauty in it, and you're just kind of in the doom and gloom, that's
Mm-hmm.
something to really be mindful of and watch out for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. Yeah. Do you have any other advice for just ways that couples kind of can connect, whether it's on a daily basis or a weekly basis or even a monthly basis, like something that we can all be striving for and working towards?
Yeah, so I think it, kind of depends on where you are in your postpartum experience, right? I'm a big believer in movement and getting outside. I think there's so
Mm-hmm.
many kind of simple ways of uh, supporting your quality of life and your overall well-being. So as long as it's not too early postpartum and you're feeling okay in your body and your recovery and pelvic floor,
Mm-hmm.
to sometimes it can be hard to sit down face to face, eye to eye with your partner and talk about stuff, but going on a walk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Taking the dogs out for a walk or whatever it might be, just going on a walk. Uh, if it's a time to connect, preferably without the kids, if they can, be with a grandparent or a friend even. Um, that can be really helpful because you have the bilateral movement, which is actually very soothing to your
Mm-hmm.
central nervous system, right? So that's working in your favor, just to be kind of connecting and speaking from a non-reactive place.
Mm-hmm.
So I suggest, people like that to do that. Um, Other things are sometimes, especially mama with the neurological shifts and sleep deprivation, sometimes talking can even just be off the table and
Yeah.
not wanting to do that. So some couples that I work with really enjoy connecting through like 2 to 5 minutes of sitting facing each other, and they can touch hands or put their hands on each other's legs or no touch at all, and just look in each other's eyes
Mm-hmm.
with no conversation, no talking. And you kind of can go through waves of laughing. It's kind of silly and then kind of boring, but there's a certain piece of deep connection that can happen just by looking into someone's eyes for a prolonged period of time without
Mm-hmm.
conversation,
Yeah.
right? It can bring you back to who that person is and just being with them truly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
Yeah.
that's another simple, easy way to do that. And then another thing that, is interesting after having a baby, right? We often, what we find, arousing or makes us feel sense of desire changes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so one book that I really like is Come As You Are by Emily Nagasaki.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of it. It's
Mm-mm.
it's fabulous. But she brings attention to this idea of brakes and accelerators.
Mm.
And these have to do with signals around us that are brakes would be kind of turn off signals,
Mm-hmm.
and then accelerators would be turn on signals.
Okay.
But it's kind of fun. On her website, you can find worksheets. I often send my client to fill out her web or her worksheets on her website, but to explore, right? What are maybe some new accelerators or new brakes for you? Whether these are sounds or smells or lighting or, time of the day, right? So just kind of reminding couples that have just had a baby, whether it's the first, second, third time, that there's going to be a new version of both of you that are
Yeah.
going to be born here. And it takes some time to get to know that for yourself as an individual, but also for your partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you noticed any big differences with challenges between a couple having their first baby or maybe their like third or fourth baby? Like, are there different dynamic struggles when it's the first time around versus having multiple kids to kind of navigate through?
Yeah, I find, that interruption piece, right, can sometimes increase with the
Mm-hmm.
more needs there are with the children. So that can be, at times, it can be harder to find time, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't only just have one little one who has their needs. If they go down for a nap, right? If you have two, is the other one down for a nap too,
Right.
right? Like, so sometimes it can be harder the more kids you have to find
Yeah.
that time. And just feeling a bit more spread thin,
Mm-hmm.
right, with your time and your energy can
Yeah.
happen. But then also, depending on the age of your kids, sometimes, if you have an older one, they can help be and entertain and play with the younger one, and it can actually alleviate you with some of that kind of focus on the little
Mm-hmm.
one. So I've seen it work in both ways
Yeah.
in that sense. Also, with having multiple children, if couples can work on this the first time around, I've worked with couples who have had multiple children and they've kind of applied, right, these exercises or this understanding of we have to figure this out again. And they've
Mm-hmm.
done it before, right? So it's less of this novelty experience of having to really be proactive
Right.
and intentional about their sex life and their time together, but they've kind of exercised that muscle. So
Mm-hmm.
while it might be a little bit different the second, third, fourth time around, they already have that concept understood. And so
Right.
that's a strength that you can bring with each child that comes forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to share that would be really beneficial for postpartum moms or new couples to understand about this period?
I think just that to know that it's a phase. I just want to remind
Mm-hmm.
people,
Yeah,
because it can feel, is this going to be how it is forever, right?
totally.
That it is a phase and it will
Mm-hmm.
change,
Yeah,
right? So I emphasize that and that it looks different for everyone. It really, really does.
right.
That's why, it's you can't really say, oh, the normal amount of time or amount of times a week or month people have sex, this and that. No, it's finding out what works for you. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
big thing I do with my clients is really figuring out, what works for them. What is
Mm-hmm.
their truth? You know, what do they like? What don't they like? It's
Mm-hmm.
so individual to just be careful to not kind of get in that comparative trap too,
Yeah.
especially with social media and how you might see or hear other couples or people going about sex after baby and how they feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
Get curious about your experience and you and your partner's way that's most beneficial for you guys at this
Mm-hmm.
time. And that will change every single time that you have a baby, and that's okay.
Yeah, I love the fact that you talked about the comparison because I think that really makes sense for any aspect of motherhood or, having a new baby. Like, oh, she's breastfeeding more, she's making more milk than me, or oh, she fit back into her pre-pregnancy
Yeah.
pants closer or faster than I did, or oh, she's, navigating doing this and going back to work and I'm struggling. Like, it's really easy just in this phase of life to get caught up in comparison in so many aspects,
Hmm.
including this of like, oh, well, my friend is, her and her husband are more intimate than we are. Does that mean that we're failing or we don't have a healthy relationship? And so I think that's a really good reminder to leave moms with every situation, every couple is different, and that's okay. And you need to find what works for you versus, constantly comparing yourself to what other couples are doing. So thank you for that
Yeah,
reminder. I think
of
every
course.
mom needs to
Yeah.
hear that one.
It's so important, and we all do it, right? We fall into
Mm-hmm.
that just with all this information at our
Oh yeah.
fingertips. But yeah, getting really curious about, what is intimacy for me and my partner now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do I like in sex now? How can that evolve too?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, where can moms connect with you, find you, work with you?
Yes, of course. I have a website is probably the best way to connect with me. It's
Okay.
kathrynlopeztherapy.com. Kathryn spelled Kathryn. I know there's so many different ways to spell it.
Yeah, there are.
Uh, and I am currently accepting new clients for online therapy. I work as a licensed marriage and family therapist for residents of California and Florida, and then I work as a life coach for people worldwide. So that is the best way to find me. It's my website, and um, yeah.
Perfect. And we'll link all of that in the show notes for
Oh,
for
thank
moms
you.
just to make it a little bit easier so that they can just
Yes.
click the link. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of the insightful information, and you guys can connect with her in the show notes, and we'll see you guys next week on the podcast. Thanks so
Wonderful.
much.
Thanks, Brooke.
Exercise is crucial for our overall mental and physical health, especially during pregnancy and postpartum. Something that has helped me stay really consistent with strength training and yoga at home during nap time is the Expecting and Empowered workout app. I love that I can choose how many weeks pregnant or postpartum I am, and the app tells me exactly what to do. Plus, there's cardio, yoga, and strength training options for new moms and moms to be. You can go ahead and click the link in the show notes to get 7 days free and also save 15% off the annual option when you use promo code Nutrition for Mamas. Thank you so much for hanging out with me and listening to the Postpartum Shift podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could share this episode with a mom friend and leave a written review. This helps the podcast reach and help even more moms. Come say hi over on Instagram at Nutrition for Mamas.